Hey everyone, I'm your host John Rennie, and thanks for joining me here in the Boneyard. For this episode of the Boneyard Horror Podcast, I want to talk about a movie that is truly epic in its proportions, famously titillating for its nudity, but also the true definition of a cult classic. So please make sure your trays are in the upright positions and your seatbelts are fastened as we jump on board a space-bound vampire adventure that is one of the greatest examples of what money and talented artists can achieve as we look at the legendary production of Tobe Hooper and Cannon Films' Lifeforce. The making of Lifeforce, released in 1985 from the now legendary movie studio Cannon Films, is one of those crazy production stories that feels as epic, stressful, and frankly amazing as the film itself. Directed by horror master Tobe Hooper, coming fresh off the critical and commercial success of the Steven Spielberg-produced Poltergeist in 1982, Lifeforce was expected to be a massive sci-fi horror hit. But like most of Cannon Films' big-budget fiascos, despite the beautiful naked cosmic vampires, which included singer Mick Jagger of the Rolling Stones' brother, and special effects wizardry of some of the most talented special effects and makeup artists that the UK had to offer at the time, Lifeforce made a brief crimson splash for about a week at the box office, and then disappeared from our screens almost completely. But fear not, as young VHS fanatics like myself and other genre-loving freaks sucked new life into the movie, and it's now one of the biggest cult titles that us movie fans have all come to embrace as one of the true greats of sci-fi horror. In the tradition of John Carpenter's The Thing and George Romero's Day of the Dead, this movie truly had a second life on VHS. In true Cannon Films fashion, the production was funded by literal suitcases of cash that would suddenly appear on set, but only when it was needed the most and the producers were pushed to pay up. The film suffered from a lot of drug taking apparently on set, perhaps a little over-ambition, and an effects budget that spiraled out of control, resulting in Lifeforce being the most expensive movie made in the UK at that time, in 1985, and I believe it may have been the most expensive movie being made in the world at that time. Even with all of these problems during production, and a pretty negative reception from critics and audiences that sent the film into obscurity for a while, Lifeforce had that second life and a massive revival on the video rental market, and for myself and many other fans out there, Lifeforce just had an undeniable coolness and a very 1980s over-the-top sensibility when we first grabbed it off the video store shelves and we fell in love with it. The fantastic practical effects blew us all away, and our love of all things weird and wonderful in the genre made the movie a genuine masterwork and a love of fans. Most of us first saw a cut that was butchered by the studio and taken away from director Tobe Hooper due to his cut being overlong and apparently him refusing to make studio deadlines. But later on DVD and Blu-ray we got the fantastic director's cut. That original VHS release we first saw was a mess, but it was a glorious mess that fans around the world still absolutely adore to this very day, and some fans I've spoken to actually prefer that original theatrical release. Lifeforce, I think, is a work of art in many ways. Its glorious 70mm style and cinematography are just exceptional. It has great performances from some of the best of British actors, such as Frank Finlay, Peter Firth, Patrick Stewart, Aubrey Morris, and Michael Gothard, and I think director Hooper sums it up best when he says, with Lifeforce, I wanted to make a multi-million-dollar Hammer horror movie inspired by Nigel Kneale and his amazing space-bound tales of Professor Bernard Quatermass. And in my humble opinion, Hooper certainly did all that, and he turned it all up to 11. Based on English writer Colin Wilson's sci-fi novel The Space Vampires, released in 1976, the film was conceptualized as a hybrid of gothic horror and science fiction, blending classic vampire mythology with the pulpy thrill of an alien invasion here in the UK. Dan O'Bannon, of Ridley Scott's Alien fame, was brought on board to help adapt the novel and write the screenplay, and that played heavily in the advertising for Lifeforce. Press releases would read from the director of Poltergeist and the Chainsaw Massacre, and the writer of Alien. And that doesn't sound like a bad thing to genre fans all over the world. But, as it usually goes in Hollywood and filmmaking, when a movie sounds like a sure thing, like a sci-fi horror movie from the creators of Texas Chain Saw Massacre and Alien might, history has taught us that nothing is a sure hit with audiences in the sci-fi and horror genre. At the time Lifeforce was in production, director Hooper had a 3-picture deal with Cannon Films, and personally, I absolutely love what he did with his time at Cannon, which included making a horror comedy sequel to his classic horror hit The Texas Chain Saw Massacre, which put Hooper on the map in 1974. And that film was The Texas Chain Saw Massacre Part 2, which to this day still divides fans of the original Chainsaw franchise, as it's so very different in style and tone to that 1974 film, which most horror fans hold sacred as a masterpiece and one of the most influential horror movies ever made. Hooper went balls to the wall with the sequel, which also had a huge Cannon Films budget and effects by the legendary Tom Savini. And in my opinion, a movie which ends with a dual chainsaw-wielding, all crazed up in revenge Dennis Hopper having a duel with Leatherface, you can't go wrong. Though many genre fans disagreed. And Chainsaw 2 is yet another cult classic from Hooper. In fact, all 3 movies that Hooper made at Cannon are now considered cult classics. The third outing he did with the company was a remake of the classic sci-fi alien invasion movie, Invaders from Mars, which he released in 1986. And as far as remakes go, this is one that really captures the 1950s B-movie spirit of the original, and I love his take on Invaders from Mars. Though many find it tacky, and the effects of the huge, chunky alien head too rubbery, and an example of bad physical effects, I would go as far as to say, leave your inhibitions at the door and have fun with Invaders from Mars, because I'm pretty sure that that is what Tobe Hooper intended us to do with this movie. It was a love letter to 50s sci-fi B-movies, which is right up my alley, and I simply love Hooper's Invaders from Mars. Cannon very rightly had very high hopes for their collaborations with Hooper, and in particular Lifeforce because of its cost. And it showed in their ambition and the size and scope of the project, and their belief in Lifeforce really shows. Every dollar that they spent is up there on the screen. Lifeforce's state-of-the-art for 1985 special effects looked terrific, and I think still look terrific today. Much better than the awful CGI we get in some big-budget movies today, like those terrible cartoonish effects that we got in such films as Meg 2: The Trench. And not only are the effects in Lifeforce great, but some of them are damned right gruesome and pack a punch for true gorehounds and horror fans that I think stand up with the best. With a budget of a reported $25 million in the end, which was a small fortune in the mid-80s, and a large-scale production involving intricate set designs, including beautiful Gothic spaceships, loads of miniatures, and this great kind of animation when the astronauts enter the tail of Halley's Comet in outer space, that has loads of elaborate action sequences. And later on, the movie includes a fully naked Mathilda May playing the lead vampire, walking through exploding glass doors and walls, and that is a huge feat in itself. The look of Lifeforce, in my opinion, is nothing short of stunning. This was Hooper's attempt at keeping the ball rolling into mainstream Hollywood after the success of Poltergeist, and proving his worth, because there had been a bit of a fiasco on the set of Poltergeist. And the press had been saying that producer Steven Spielberg had ghost-directed that film himself. So in Lifeforce, I think Hooper really had something to prove, and he brought his A-game to the set and went all out with his totally unique blend of genre filmmaking, theatrical lighting, and spectacle horror that only he truly has. But of course, things didn't exactly go according to plan. One of the biggest troubles in making Lifeforce was the scale of the production itself. Cannon Films, the notoriously ambitious yet sometimes reckless production company behind Lifeforce who bankrolled the film, were perhaps a bit too liberal with those suitcases of money that they were bringing onto set. Cannon Films made some of the most beloved films for fans of the weird and wonderful of the 1980s, such as Masters of the Universe, Superman 4, the End of the Ninja series, and many over-the-top action masterpieces with the likes of Charles Bronson and Chuck Norris. and it is clear that the company managers, Menem Golan and Yoram Globus, loved making movies, and their passion shines through, but unfortunately, it was their passion that would eventually be their downfall. The initial budget for Lifeforce ballooned, and by the time shooting started, it became clear that the film was spiraling out of control. The script, a fantastic mix of space exploration, body horror, and supernatural naked vampires, kept undergoing rewrites, leading to confusion on set, and a general sense that no one, except Tobe Hooper himself, really understood the tone and direction of the movie. On top of that, the special effects which Hooper had promised the studio would be groundbreaking were frequently delayed or outright failed to meet the vision that Hooper and his team had initially said they could achieve. The ambitious opening sequence, featuring the beautiful gothic and massive spaceship which gives us the magical reveal of the space vampires, became a logistical nightmare, with set pieces requiring constant adjustment and effects crews working overtime to meet impossible deadlines. The final result was met with negative critical reviews that said while visually arresting in parts, this movie often feels incomplete or rough around the edges. And although I do agree there are moments that could have used some refinement, my personal take on Lifeforce is that it is quite a marvel of scope and design. And even though some of the special effects may seem incomplete, I think it serves the story perfectly. And when I first saw the movie in the days of VHS, it blew my mind. As a film fan, I often get engrossed in the story more than the special effects, and I think in the case of Lifeforce, the special effects do service the story very well. And the beautiful space vampires, the sadistic nurses, like these unhinged astronauts, mad scientists, they all fit perfectly into this kind of gothic opera masterpiece that I think Hooper was trying to tell us. And then we get that amazing zombie-like ending to the film, where we see the special agent driving through the town of London on fire. It just looks fantastic. And I think it's in these excesses that make Lifeforce stand out as a true original horror of 1980s. I think it's a fantastic movie. And one of the excesses that I talk about is the now infamous casting decision of a relatively unknown French actress at that time, Mathilda May, who was cast as a seductive female space vampire. May spends most of her screen time completely naked, embodying the hypnotic and deadly allure of the vampires. Her stunning beauty and otherworldly presence became an iconic part of the film, but behind the scenes, it added to the already strained atmosphere. Critics were divided on whether her casting was an inspired choice or gratuitous in its nature, and it became one of the many elements of Lifeforce that left critics baffled, and audiences were unsure if they should feel afraid of this character or be turned on by this element of the movie. Personally, I see this as the age-old trope of sex and death. Horror being a genre aimed at younger audiences who were dealing with their blossoming feelings of sexuality and also dealing with death for the first time in their lives, something that fellow horror maker Sean S. Cunningham called the fear of untimely death when he was creating the iconic Friday the 13th franchise. Cunningham takes a stance that younger audiences are drawn to slashers and horror movies, as filmmakers can use horror as a way to help exercise the fear that teens feel when they lose a friend or family member at a young age. Cunningham said he wanted to get that fear out in the open and talk about the fear of untimely death in a safe environment of the horror movie, and obviously it worked, as Friday the 13th became a huge horror hit. The horror and slasher genre has always mixed these feelings of sex and death, and I think May, as the seductive nude vampire, embodies these aspects of visual horror perfectly. But even as a young horror fan, I saw that there was a double standard here, as there were also male vampires that were nude, and they did not have to appear fully frontally nude on screen. So, although nudity in the film, or film in general, it's never really bothered me, to be fair, especially when it's there for a reason, like, say, Harvey Keitel, full frontal naked in Bad Lieutenant, which makes perfect sense for the audience to see this character naked, as he is bearing everything and his soul in the story of that movie. Mathilda May's nudity in Lifeforce did seem a little over the top and objectifying at times. But at the same time, why would a space vampire need clothes or indeed have them? And all three of the vampires were naked, so in that sense it makes perfect sense to the story. But it's a funny question. It's a funny debate, I think, to have that, whether it's gratuitous or not, because she was naked for a much longer time than she had to be, I think. But what do you all think about this out there in the boneyard? About Mathilda May's nudity in the film, or indeed nudity on screen in general? Let me know in the comments below, and please don't forget that if you're enjoying this content so far, and you're enjoying this podcast, don't forget to hit that like button, because it really helps out the channel. So back to Lifeforce. As the budget for Lifeforce kept getting bigger and tensions on set increased, Hooper began to face difficulties with studio interference. Golan and Globus, who although passionate filmmakers and producers, were also notorious for pushing their filmmakers to churn out marketable hits that would give them a return on their investments. And as the production of Lifeforce began to unravel, it's said that they began to step in more and more frequently, trying to kind of deal with this chaos. What had started as a nearly 2-hour epic was drastically cut down in post-production, with entire scenes being re-edited or removed to make the film more palatable to wider audiences. This resulted in the theatrical cut of the movie that felt fragmented and shifted in tone. Some of it was kind of intense horror, and then some of the producer's cut kinda, I think, edges over into outright camp, especially in the scenes with the girl in the park and Patrick Stewart in the asylum. And I think this is where the studio made their biggest mistake with that original theatrical cut. Tobe Hooper is a great filmmaker. I mean, he's always made awesome movies, I think. I think the Texas Chain Saw Massacre '74 is a masterpiece. Funhouse, he did in 1981, is a masterpiece. And I really, really love his TV movie, I'm Dangerous Tonight, that he did with March and Amick in 1992. And what makes Hooper's films work is their fine line between absurdist comedy and horror that only he has. Hooper has always had a macabre sense of humor, which is dark as night, and that is what makes his works distinctively his own. Hooper was fired at the end of production of Lifeforce, and his original 128-minute version was cut down to 100 minutes for its release, and the wonderful original score by Henry Mancini, which makes the film feel like a sci-fi epic opera, was cut in favor of a more generic horror score. In all fairness, the generic horror score was by the equally talented Michael Kamen, but Mancini's score for Lifeforce is some of his best work, and I have no idea why they wanted to cut it, as it gave the movie a more epic, adventurous tone, which in the opening credits prepares you as the audience for this crazy tale that Hooper is about to tell us. All these changes were made to quicken the pace of the film and make it a generic horror, and this re-edit lost over 20 minutes of breathtaking sci-fi elements from the opening act of the movie, and instead told them in this simple flashback sequence. When these changes were made, I think the film lost the edge that Hooper provides with his distinctive style, and that is one of the main reasons of many why the movie didn't make a bigger bang, I think, on its release. When a studio interferes too much, they stifle the original singular voice of the filmmaker, and in that sense the movie loses its one-way vision and becomes compromised. I mean, if you're gonna hire the horror maestro, Tobe Hooper, you should just let him do his thing. Because that's why you hired the director of the Texas Chain Saw Massacre in the first place. That man knew what the heck he was doing in film. But this wasn't the only reason for the film's initial failure. It didn't help that the film's release coincided with a wave of high-profile sci-fi films like Back to the Future and Cocoon, which overshadowed Lifeforce both critically and commercially. The marketing was another point of contention. Some posters emphasized the horror aspect, while others leaned into the space adventure, only leaving audiences more confused about what kind of movie they were meant to be walking into. Was this a sci-fi epic? Was it a gothic horror with a spaceship that looks like some kind of hybrid of Alien and Dracula? Was this a B-movie with an A budget? What was this weird sci-fi flick from the twisted mind behind the Texas Chain Saw Massacre? Audiences simply either didn't watch because of the marketing, or didn't quite understand how they should view this genre-bending sci-fi action horror epic. The production also changed the name of the movie to Lifeforce, as they thought the original title of Colin Wilson's novel Space Vampires was too corny. But many argued that if they had stuck with the original title, fans of the already very popular novel would have flocked to see the film. And of course, if the movie was called Space Vampires, there would have been no confusion over what the movie was about at all. Despite all the turmoil, there's something wholeheartedly original and special about Hooper's Lifeforce. I fell in love with this movie on my very first viewing, even in its re-edited, rescored producer's cut when I saw it on VHS. Looking back, it feels like a perfect storm of 80s excess. A movie that shot for the moon, totally missed, but managed to hit a vampire spaceship hidden in the tail of Halley's Comet instead. And in my opinion, there is certainly no other movie even remotely like Lifeforce. And for me, when I see something wholly original in the horror genre, I applaud it. And it takes sheer talent and audacity to give horror fans new ideas that take chances and in turn create new visuals that inspire and amaze audiences and give them something that they have never seen before. And for me, this is, and always has been, what separates Tobe Hooper from the other generic placeholder directors who simply rinse and repeat old ideas or do exactly what the studio execs tell them to do. I know that I can say for sure that as a devout fan of original out-there horror cinema that is created by filmmakers who know their craft, Lifeforce is a truly original vision of an apocalyptic London being devastated by space vampires. I mean, you can probably tell I simply love this movie. I love the sheer audacity of its plot, with beautiful male and female naked space vampires descending upon London. I love its final act that devolves into an apocalyptic madness that has literally hordes of life-sucking vampire zombies ripping the city of London apart as it burns in a glorious, world-ending affair. And as another aspect of this movie I love, the film was actually recommended to me by a zombie movie fan the first time I saw it, who said that Lifeforce's ending was on par with George Romero's classic zombie apocalyptic movie Dawn of the Dead. And I agree, the ending of Lifeforce, I think, is one of the greatest zombie outbreaks ever committed to film. Many people say that Zack Snyder's opening of the 2004 remake of Dawn of the Dead is the best zombie outbreak ever filmed. Or some say Umberto Lenzi's Nightmare City that has vampire zombies literally overrunning an entire city, or indeed Lucio Fulci's Zombie Flesh Eaters that has zombie hordes marching over the Brooklyn Bridge. But I've always loved Lifeforce's final act, that has a Secret Service agent driving through London as the streets are on fire and overrun with life-sucking zombies. I think it's one of the best scenes of apocalyptic zombie madness I ever saw or that I'll ever see. And believe me, coming from a zombie fan like myself, that's saying a lot. It's a film that embodies the more is more ethos of the decade. More explosions, more nudity, more special effects. Its ideas and scale are massive. And I think Hooper completely pulls off this epic story of desire, death, and disaster with his fantastic direction of incredible special effects, but also bringing to it his independent roots that gives us the great space vampire movie Lifeforce. For Tobe Hooper, the filmmaker, Lifeforce marked both a high point and a low point in his career. While it was his biggest budget movie, it didn't give him the mainstream breakthrough he might have hoped for. But for me and many other fans, it remains an influential example of his bold, original, genre-defining work in the horror genre. After the 80s, Hooper would work in lower and lower budget filmmaking until his final few independent horror movies that would kind of fall into obscurity. I happen to love Tobe Hooper's later works as well, such as the visually stunning Jinn from 2013, which was his final film, I think. And I put his remake of the infamous slasher The Toolbox Murders that came out in 2004 up there with the very best of 2000s horror. I love that kind of rain-drenched dread and the black comedy of that movie. I think it's a great remake. But those movies are the subject of a whole other discussion that will soon have their own plots here in the Boneyard. So, to sum up, here are some final thoughts until we revisit Hooper again. Lifeforce is less about the vampires in space and more about a filmmaker, in my opinion, who dared to dream massive. Maybe sometimes too big, but in the middle of all this production chaos, Hooper, the horror legend, managed to create something impossible to categorize and more impossible to to forget. This is a movie made by a filmmaker who loved to tell stories that draw in an audience and show them something they have never seen before and make them feel like they have never felt before. And in that regard, Tobe Hooper's Lifeforce definitely delivers to all genre fans. Every time I've recommended this movie to another genre fan over the years, they've always come back to me with a gleam in their eyes and asked me, John, why have I never seen this movie before? Let's crack open a few beers and watch it again together. And what more can you ask for from a horror movie?
Here I go.
Thanks for listening to my take on Tobe Hooper's Lifeforce. If you did like this content, please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I'd like to say a huge thank you to all channel members and Patreon supporters here on the channel, and welcome on board new Boneyard member, Recurrent Patton. If you want to support the channel, you can use the PayPal link in the description or drop a super thanks, or make all your friends envious with some merch from the Boneyard store. And please remember to leave a comment below to keep this conversation going, because it's your contributions that keeps me digging up classics right here in the Boneyard. So please take care, everyone. And remember, if you want to walk through London in the nude, this time of year it gets a bit cold, so it's best to bring a jacket. Thanks very much, everyone.